The shopping mall buzzed with afternoon activity as families wandered past store windows and teenagers gathered around food court tables. Among the flowing crowd, a young man named Marcus stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on something that seemed to hold him in a trance. There, in the center of the mall's main plaza, sat a gleaming black grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the overhead lights like a mirror. The piano had been placed there as part of a promotional event for a local music academy, and a velvet rope surrounded it with a small sign that read, "Display only. Please do not touch." Marcus was 23 years old, tall and thin with clothes that had seen better days. His jacket was slightly too large, probably bought from a thrift store, and his shoes were worn at the heels. He carried a backpack that held his belongings from his job as a dishwasher at a restaurant 3 blocks away. His shift had just ended, and like most days, he walked through the mall on his way to the bus stop. But today was different. Today, he saw the piano. His fingers twitched at his sides as he stared at the instrument. Something deep inside his chest ached with a longing he couldn't put into words. Marcus had never taken a piano lesson in his life. He had never even touched a real piano before. Growing up in a small apartment with his grandmother, there had been no money for music lessons or instruments. His grandmother had worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Luxuries like music education were dreams that belonged to other people. People who lived in houses with yards and had parents who could afford to nurture their children's talents. But Marcus had always heard music in his head. When he washed dishes at the restaurant, his hands moved in rhythm to melodies that played in his mind. When he rode the bus, he tapped out beats on his knees. At night, lying on his thin mattress in his tiny room, he imagined his fingers dancing across ivory keys, creating sounds that would make people stop and listen. He didn't know where this music came from or why it filled him so completely. He only knew that it was there, always there, waiting for a chance to escape. A security guard stood nearby, a middle-aged man with a round belly and a bored expression. He was there to make sure nobody touched the expensive instrument. Marcus watched as a small child tried to reach up to the keys, only to have the guard gently redirect the family away. The piano remained silent, beautiful, and untouchable. Marcus took a step closer. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew he shouldn't, knew that the sign clearly said not to touch, but the pull was too strong. It was as if the piano was calling to him, as if it had been waiting for him all along. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out toward the velvet rope. "Hey, back up from there," the security guard called out, his voice sharp but not unkind. "Can't you read?" "No touching." Marcus pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. "I just wanted to. Could I just—" His voice trailed off. How could he explain this feeling? How could he make this stranger understand that his entire body was humming with the need to touch those keys? "Rules are rules, buddy," the guard said, shaking his head. "This piano belongs to the academy. It's worth more than my car. Nobody plays it except their professional instructors during demonstration times." "When are those?" Marcus asked quickly, hope flaring in his chest. "Already happened. 10 o'clock this morning. Next one isn't until Saturday at the same time." The guard softened slightly, seeing the disappointment cloud Marcus's face. "You interested in lessons? They've got brochures over at the information desk." Marcus looked down at his worn shoes. Lessons would cost money he didn't have. He worked 40 hours a week at minimum wage, and every penny went to rent, food, and the bus pass that got him to work. There was nothing extra, nothing left over for dreams. "No," he said quietly. I'll just go." But he didn't go. He couldn't. Instead, he moved to a bench about 20 feet away and sat down. From there, he could see the piano clearly. People walked past it constantly, barely giving it a glance. To them, it was just another piece of furniture, another decoration in a mall full of distractions. But to Marcus, it was everything. He watched as the afternoon light streaming through the skylight above shifted and changed, creating patterns on the piano's surface. He imagined what it would feel like to sit on that bench, to rest his fingers on those keys. Would they be smooth? Would they be cool to the touch? What would happen when he pressed down? Would the sound that emerged be as beautiful as the sounds in his head? An elderly woman walked by, pushing a shopping cart. A group of teenage girls passed, laughing at something on their phones. A man in a business suit hurried past, talking loudly into his phone about deadlines and meetings. None of them saw what Marcus saw. None of them felt what he felt. The security guard noticed him sitting there and frowned. "You planning on staying all day?" he called over. Marcus stood up quickly. "No, sir. Sorry." He hitched his backpack higher on his shoulder and started walking toward the exit, but he stopped after just a few steps and turned back for one more look. The piano sat there, silent and magnificent, holding all the music in the world inside its wooden frame. Someday, Marcus whispered to himself, someday, I'm going to play you. The guard heard him and chuckled, not cruelly, but with the kind of laugh adults give to impossible dreams. Sure, kid, you and everybody else who's ever seen a piano. Marcus walked away, but the image of that instrument stayed, burned into his mind. That night, as he lay in his bed, his fingers moved in the darkness, pressing down on invisible keys, playing songs that no one else could hear. He didn't know it yet, but that moment in the mall had changed something inside him. A door had opened, and there was no closing it now. The need to play, to create, to let the music out, had become more than a want. It had become a necessity, as vital as breathing. And somehow, some way, Marcus knew that he would find a way to touch those keys, no matter what it took. For 3 days, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the piano. At work, his hands moved mechanically through stacks of dirty plates and greasy pans. But his mind was miles away, replaying the image of that beautiful instrument. His coworker, an older woman named Rosa, noticed his distraction when he nearly dropped an entire tray of glasses. "What's going on with you?" she asked, catching his arm to steady him. "You've been walking around like a ghost." Marcus hesitated, then told her about the piano. Rosa listened patiently, wiping her hands on her apron. When he finished, she smiled sadly. "Music gets in your blood," she said. "My son was like that with the guitar. But wanting something and getting it are two different things, Mijo." That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He went to the public library. The building was old but well-maintained, with tall shelves that seemed to touch the ceiling. He found his way to the computer section and sat down at a terminal. His typing was slow, two-fingered, and careful, but he searched for videos of people playing piano. What he found amazed him. There were thousands of videos, people of all ages, playing everything from classical music to modern songs. He watched with complete focus, studying how their hands moved, how their fingers curved over the keys, how their bodies swayed with the music. He watched until the library announced it was closing, then reluctantly shut down the computer. On his way out, he passed through the music section. Books about piano technique lined the shelves. He pulled one down and opened it carefully, as if it might break. Inside were diagrams of hands, explanations of notes and chords, pictures of the keyboard with labels. Marcus checked out 3 books, the maximum allowed on his new library card. For the next 2 weeks, Marcus devoted every free moment to learning. He read about music theory in his tiny apartment. He drew a paper keyboard on a piece of cardboard and practiced finger positions while sitting on his bed. His grandmother, who lived down the hall in the same building, watched him with concern. She had raised him since he was 6 years old, when his mother had left him on her doorstep and never returned. She worried about the intensity she saw in his eyes now. "Marcus, baby, you need to be realistic," she said one evening when she brought him leftover soup. "Dreams are nice, but bills are real. You got a job. You got food. That's more than many people have." "I know, Grandma," Marcus said, looking up from his books. "I'm not quitting my job. I need to try this. I can't explain it." She sighed and kissed the top of his head. "You got your mother's stubbornness. Just don't forget the world doesn't care about dreams. The world cares about rent money." Marcus knew she was right, but he couldn't stop. Every Saturday morning, he went back to the mall at exactly 10 o'clock to watch the demonstration. An instructor from the music academy would sit at the piano and play for 30 minutes, showing off techniques and encouraging people to sign up for classes. Marcus stood at the edge of the small crowd that gathered, absorbing everything. He noticed patterns in how the instructor's fingers moved. He saw how certain combinations of keys created specific sounds. He memorized the way the instructor sat, the posture, the arm, position. When the demonstrations ended and people wandered away, Marcus stayed until the security guard made him leave. The guard, whose name tag read William, had started to recognize him. "You're that kid who's always hanging around," William said during the third Saturday visit. "Why don't you just sign up for lessons if you're so interested?" "Can't afford it," Marcus admitted simply. William studied him for a moment. "You know, wanting something real bad doesn't make it happen. That's a lesson I learned the hard way." "What did you want?" Marcus asked. William's expression shifted, becoming distant. "Wanted to be a cop. A detective. But life had other plans. Bad knee, bad timing. And here I am, watching over a piano in a mall." He shrugged. "Point is, sometimes you got to accept what's possible and let go of what's not." But Marcus couldn't let go. He started arriving at the mall even earlier, hoping to catch moments when the piano might be unguarded. He learned William's schedule, knew when he took his breaks, but there was always someone watching. The mall management took the security of that expensive instrument seriously. One evening, Marcus was walking past a church on his way home from work. The doors were open, and he heard music drifting out into the twilight. Piano music. His feet carried him inside before his brain could stop him. The sanctuary was dim, lit only by a few lights near the altar. An old man sat at an upright piano against the wall, playing a hymn with gentle, practiced movements. Marcus stood in the shadows, listening. When the song ended, the old man looked up and saw him. "Can I help you, son?" I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "I heard the music. I didn't mean to interrupt." "No interruption. I'm just the church pianist, warming up for tomorrow's service." The man was thin and gray-haired, with kind eyes behind thick glasses. "I'm Father Matthews. You're welcome to sit and listen if you'd like." Marcus moved closer, drawn by the instrument. This piano was nothing like the grand piano at the mall. It was old and scratched, with yellowed keys and a bench that wobbled slightly. But to Marcus, it was beautiful. "Have you played for a long time?" he asked. 60 years, give or take," Father Matthews said with a smile. "Started when I was 7, my mother insisted. At first, I hated every minute of practice. Now I can't imagine life without it." He gestured to the bench. "Do you play?" Marcus shook his head. "No, but I want to learn. More than I've ever wanted anything." Something in his voice must have conveyed the depth of his longing because Father Matthews studied him carefully. "There's a hunger in you," he said finally. "I've seen it before in people who have music living inside them, trying to get out." He paused, then made a decision. "The church is open for evening prayers every Wednesday and Friday at 6. I'm usually here 30 minutes early, practicing. If you want to come listen, you're welcome." "Really?" Marcus felt hope surge through him. "Really? And son?" Father Matthews looked at him seriously. "If you truly want to learn, I mean truly want it, with everything you have, then you'll find a way. The universe has a funny way of opening doors for people who refuse to give up." Marcus started attending the church twice a week, sitting in the back pew and watching Father Matthews play. The old pianist would explain what he was doing sometimes, talking about technique and theory. Marcus absorbed it all like a sponge. He filled notebooks with observations, drew more diagrams, practiced his imaginary piano until his fingers ached. But watching and learning theory wasn't the same as actually playing. His frustration grew daily. He felt like a person dying of thirst who could see water but couldn't drink it. The piano at the mall remained impossibly off-limits. The church piano was never left unattended. Everywhere he turned, the instruments he needed were just out of reach. Late one night, unable to sleep, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table and stared at his hands. These hands washed dishes 8 hours a day. These hands had never created anything beautiful. These hands held music that no one would ever hear. The injustice of it burned in his chest. Why should something as simple as money stand between him and the thing he loved most? Why should poverty mean silence? He made a decision then. He would find a way to play that piano in the mall. He didn't know how yet, but he would figure it out. He had come too far, learned too much, wanted it too desperately to give up now. Marcus began planning with careful attention to detail. He studied the mall's routines like a detective working a case. He knew that William worked the day shift from 9 to 5 on weekdays. He knew that another guard, a younger man named Derek, took over in the evenings. He knew that Derek was often distracted, spending time on his phone or chatting with workers from the pretzel stand. More importantly, Marcus discovered that every Tuesday evening, the mall hosted a meeting of local business owners in the conference room on the second floor. During these meetings, Derek was often called upstairs to help with setup or to handle issues in other parts of the building. The piano area would be less monitored during those windows, but knowing when to try wasn't enough. Marcus needed a reason to be there, a way to blend in so he wouldn't look suspicious. He couldn't just rush to the piano and start playing. That would get him thrown out immediately, possibly banned from the mall entirely. The solution came from an unexpected source. One evening at the restaurant, his boss asked him to stay late to help clean the kitchen for a health inspection. Marcus agreed, and as he scrubbed the stove, the head cook, a man named Tony, struck up a conversation. "You're a good worker, Marcus," Tony said, wiping down counters. "Reliable. Never complain. Why you still washing dishes? You could do better. Saving money." Marcus lied. He wasn't saving anything. Every dollar went to survive. For what? Marcus hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I want to learn piano. I want it more than anything. But I can't afford lessons. Can't afford an instrument. I've been teaching myself from books and videos." Tony stopped wiping and looked at him with interest. "No kidding? My daughter takes piano lessons. Been doing it for 3 years. Costs me a fortune." He thought for a moment. "You know what? The mall's got that piano for display. I've seen street musicians play in public places before. Why don't you just ask permission? They'd say no. It's for academy instructors only. So, don't ask," Tony said with a shrug. "Sometimes forgiveness is easier to get than permission. You go there, you sit down, you play. What's the worst that happens? They tell you to stop, you stop. Simple." Marcus considered this. It wasn't really a plan, but it was the closest thing to permission he had heard. The idea both terrified and excited him. What if he tried and failed? What if his hands froze? What if the music in his head wouldn't translate to his fingers? Worse, what if he had been fooling himself all along, and he had no talent at all? But Tuesday came, and Marcus found himself standing outside the mall at 6:30 in the evening. His hands were sweating. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had spent the previous night barely sleeping, running through songs in his mind, imagining his fingers on the keys. He wore his cleanest shirt and had combed his hair carefully. If he was going to do this, he wanted to look respectable. Inside the mall, the evening crowd was lighter than during the day. Stores were preparing to close. The piano sat in its usual place, the velvet ropes still marking its boundaries. Derek was nowhere in sight. Marcus checked his phone. 6:45. The business meeting would be starting soon. He walked past the piano once, twice, 3 times, trying to build his courage. An elderly couple sat on a nearby bench, resting their shopping bags. A woman pushed a stroller past. Nobody was paying attention to the piano. It was just part of the scenery. Then Marcus saw Derek heading toward the escalator, radio in hand. This was it. This was his moment. If he waited, he might never get another chance. His grandmother's words echoed in his head, warnings about being realistic. Father Matthew's words countered them. Encouragement about doors opening for those who refuse to give up. Marcus walked to the piano. His legs felt like they might give out. He looked around one more time, then stepped over the velvet rope. His hands reached out and grasped the edge of the piano bench. The wood was smooth and cool. He pulled the bench out slightly and sat down. The piano suddenly seemed enormous. The keys stretched before him, black and white, perfect and pristine. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality was different. The weight of it settled over him. This was real. He was really here. His hands trembled as he lifted them over the keys. For a moment, panic seized him. What was he doing? He didn't know what he was doing. He had never touched a real piano before. All his practice had been on paper. In his imagination, this was insane. He should leave right now, before someone saw him, before he embarrassed himself completely. But his hands lowered to the keys anyway. The touch was electric. The keys were smooth, perfectly balanced. His right index finger pressed down on middle C. The note rang out, clear and pure, echoing through the mall plaza. It was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. He pressed another key, then another. The notes came slowly at first, hesitant and uncertain. He played a simple scale, the way he had practiced on his cardboard keyboard 1,000 times. The sounds were right. They matched what he heard in his head. His confidence grew. Then, without planning it, without thinking about it, Marcus began to play a melody. It was a simple song, something he had heard Father Matthews play at the church. His fingers moved across the keys, finding the notes by instinct. The music flowed out of him like water breaking through a dam. Everything else disappeared. The mall, the people, his fear, his doubt, all of it faded away. There was only the piano and the music. He didn't know that a small crowd had started to gather. He didn't see the elderly couple stand up from their bench to listen. He didn't notice the woman with the stroller stop walking. He didn't hear the teenager tell his friends to be quiet. He was lost in the music, in the joy of finally being able to let the sounds inside him out into the world. His hands moved faster, more confident. He transitioned to another song, something more complex. His fingers found chords he had only read about in books. They moved in patterns he had memorized from watching videos. It shouldn't have worked. He had never practiced on a real piano. But somehow, it did work. The music poured out of him effortlessly, as if it had been waiting his entire life for this moment. The crowd grew larger. People stopped shopping to listen. Store employees came out to see what was happening. The elderly couple was smiling. The woman with the stroller was recording on her phone. More people joined them, drawn by the music. Marcus played for 10 minutes straight, moving from one song to another seamlessly. He played hymns and classical pieces he had memorized from listening to Father Matthews. He played melodies he had heard on the radio. He even improvised, letting his fingers create new sounds, new combinations, testing the limits of what he could do. Then he saw Derek pushing through the crowd, radio in hand, face showing surprise and anger. Marcus's hands froze on the keys. The last note hung in the air. Reality crashed back in. What had he done? He had broken the rules. He was about to be thrown out, possibly arrested for trespassing or damaging property. But before Derek could reach him, something unexpected happened. The crowd began to applaud. It started with one person, then another. Then, suddenly, everyone was clapping. The sound was thunderous in the mall plaza. People were cheering, whistling, calling out praise. Marcus stood up from the bench, his legs shaking. He had never felt so exposed and so alive at the same time. Derek reached him, but his angry expression had changed to confusion. The security guard looked at the crowd, then at Marcus, then back at the crowd. "You can't just," Derek started to say, but his words were drowned out by the continued applause. An older man in a suit pushed through the crowd. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive watch. "Who are you?" he asked Marcus, his voice carrying authority. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus stood frozen, his mouth dry, unable to form words. The man in the suit waited expectantly, while the crowd's applause began to fade. Derek stood nearby, looking uncertain about whether to escort Marcus out or wait to see what this well-dressed stranger wanted. "I asked you a question," the man said, but his tone was more curious than angry. "Where did you study?" "I didn't," Marcus finally managed to say. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I taught myself. From books. From watching videos. I've never touched a real piano before tonight." The crowd, which had quieted to listen, suddenly erupted in murmurs of disbelief and amazement. The man's eyebrows raised dramatically. "That's impossible. Nobody plays like that without training. Without years of practice on an actual instrument." "I practiced," Marcus said, finding his voice growing stronger. "Every day. On paper. In my head. I just never had access to a piano." The woman with the stroller called out, "I recorded the whole thing. It was incredible." Others in the crowd voiced their agreement, saying things like, "Best thing I've heard in years," and "Gave me chills." Derek finally spoke up, his voice apologetic but firm. "Look, this is all great, but sir, you can't just jump over the rope and play mall property. Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry he got past me. I was dealing with a situation upstairs." So the man in the suit was Mr. Harrison. Marcus would learn later that he owned the music academy, the very one that had placed the piano here as advertisement. Mr. Harrison held up a hand to silence Derek. "It's fine. I want to hear more." He turned back to Marcus. "What's your name?" "Marcus. Marcus Williams." "Well, Marcus Williams, that was extraordinary. Raw, yes. Technically, imperfect in places. Certainly. But the feeling, the musicality, the natural understanding of phrasing and dynamics." "Mr. Harrison shook his head in wonder. "I've been teaching piano for 40 years. I've seen thousands of students. What you just did shouldn't be possible." "Are you going to have me arrested?" Marcus asked quietly. Mr. Harrison laughed. A genuine sound of amusement. "Arrested? No. But I do want you to play something else. Something specific. Can you play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement?" Marcus searched his memory. He had watched videos of that piece, had studied the sheet music in one of his library books. He knew the melody, knew the general structure. But could he actually play it? "I can try," he said. "Good enough." Mr. Harrison gestured to the piano bench. "Please." The crowd, which had started to disperse, immediately gathered again. More people joined them, drawn by the commotion. Marcus sat back down at the piano, his heart racing even faster than before. The Moonlight Sonata was famous, beautiful, and technically challenging. If he messed this up, everyone would know. They would see that he was just a fraud, a dishwasher with delusions of talent. He placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes for a moment. He heard the piece in his head. Every note, every subtle shift in emotion. When he opened his eyes and began to play, the world fell away again. The opening notes flowed out, gentle and haunting. Marcus's right hand carried the melody, while his left hand provided the rolling accompaniment. He made mistakes, small ones that probably only Mr. Harrison noticed. He had to pause twice to remember what came next, his fingers hovering over the keys while his brain caught up. But the soul of the piece was there. The sadness, the longing, the gentle melancholy that Beethoven had poured into those notes more than 200 years ago. When Marcus finished, the silence that followed lasted for several heartbeats. Then the applause came again, even louder this time. Some people had tears in their eyes. The elderly woman from the bench was openly crying. Even Derek, the security guard, was clapping enthusiastically. Mr. Harrison approached the piano, and Marcus could see that the older man's eyes were slightly wet. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "Truly remarkable. Marcus, I want to offer you something. A full scholarship to my academy. Lessons, practice time, everything. Free of charge." Marcus felt the world tilt. Because talent like yours is rare. Because everyone deserves a chance to develop their gifts. Because in 40 years of teaching, I've never seen anyone with your natural ability. Mr. Harrison pulled a business card from his pocket. "Come to the academy tomorrow. We'll discuss details. What times work for your schedule?" "I work every day," Marcus said. 9 to 5 at a restaurant. Washing dishes. We have evening classes. 7 to 9, 3 times a week. Can you manage that? Marcus thought about his exhaustion after work. About the bus rides. About everything he would have to juggle. None of it mattered. Yes. Yes. I can manage that. Mr. Harrison smiled. Then, I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Don't be late. He turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed the beginning of something special. Remember this moment. Remember his name. Marcus Williams. The crowd applauded again, and several people approached Marcus as he stood up from the piano. They wanted to shake his hand, to tell him how much they enjoyed his playing, to take pictures with him. Marcus felt overwhelmed, dizzy with the suddenness of it all. An hour ago, he had been nobody. Now people were treating him like he was important, like he mattered. The woman who had recorded his performance asked if she could post it online. "People need to see this," she said. "This kind of raw talent. It's inspiring." Marcus gave his permission, not understanding what that would mean. The elderly couple pressed a $20 bill into his hand, despite his protests. "You earned it," the old man said. "That was better than any concert I've paid to see." Derek approached as the crowd finally began to disperse. "Man, I should write you up," he said, but he was grinning. "Instead, I'm just gonna pretend I was on break when this happened." "That was incredible. You really never played before?" "Never," Marcus confirmed. "Wild. Just wild." Derek shook his head. "Good luck with your lessons." Marcus left the mall walking on air. His hands still tingled from touching the keys. The music still echoed in his head. But now, it was mixed with the memory of real sounds. The actual notes he had created. He had done it. He had actually done it. On the bus ride home, he stared at Mr. Harrison's business card. The academy's address was printed in elegant script. He texted his grandmother the news, his fingers flying over his phone screen. Her response came quickly. "Very proud, baby. But don't quit your job. Can't pay rent with piano playing." She was being practical, protecting him from disappointment. But Marcus didn't care about practicality right now. For the first time in his life, he had hope that was based on something real, something tangible. He had proven, at least to himself, that the music in his head could exist in the world, that his hands could create beauty, that he wasn't crazy for wanting this so desperately. When he got home to his small apartment, he couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table and played his cardboard keyboard. But now, it was different. Now, he knew what the keys felt like. Now he knew the resistance, the weight, the response. His practice had new meaning. New purpose. The video the woman posted online began spreading that same night. By morning, it had a few hundred views. By the afternoon, a few thousand. People shared it with comments like, "Hidden talent discovered," and proof that passion matters more than privilege. The media loved stories like this. The underdog. The self-taught genius. The poor kid who made good through sheer determination. Marcus didn't know about any of that yet. He was at work, washing dishes with a smile on his face that confused Rosa. "Did you win the lottery or something?" she asked, seeing his expression. "Better," Marcus said. And then he told her everything. Rosa hugged him, soap suds and all. "I knew you'd find a way," she said. That evening, Marcus arrived at the music academy 15 minutes early. The building was beautiful, with practice rooms visible through large windows. He could hear piano music coming from inside, multiple instruments playing different pieces, creating a complex symphony of sound. His heart swelled with anticipation as he walked through the front door, ready to begin the next chapter of his life. The academy's reception area was elegant, with cream-colored walls decorated with framed photographs of famous pianists and students who had gone on to successful careers. A young woman behind the desk looked up as Marcus entered, her professional smile warming when she recognized him. "You're Marcus. Mr. Harrison told us to expect you. The video is everywhere. My sister sent it to me this morning." She stood and extended her hand. "I'm Jennifer. Let me take you to the studio." Marcus followed her down a hallway lined with practice rooms. Through the windows, he saw students of various ages, working with instructors or practicing alone. The sounds of scales, exercises, and partial melodies filled the air. It was the most beautiful chaos Marcus had ever experienced. Jennifer led him to a larger room at the end of the hall. Mr. Harrison was inside, seated at a magnificent grand piano, playing a complex piece with effortless skill. He finished his phrase when he saw Marcus and stood up with a welcoming smile. "Right on time. That's good. Punctuality is important." Mr. Harrison gestured to the piano. "This will be your practice instrument when the room is available. We'll work out a schedule. But first, I need to assess exactly where you are in terms of technique and theory." For the next hour, Mr. Harrison tested Marcus's knowledge. He asked him to identify notes, to explain musical terms, to demonstrate what he knew about hand position and posture. Marcus answered what he could, admitting freely when he didn't know something. The gaps in his self-taught education were obvious, but so was the depth of what he had managed to learn on his own. "Your theoretical knowledge is surprisingly solid," Mr. Harrison said, making notes on a pad. "Your understanding of musical structure is intuitive, but accurate. However, your technique needs work. The way you hold your hands will cause strain over time. Your pedal work is non-existent because you've never had access to pedals. And your sight reading needs development." "I can learn," Marcus said eagerly. "I'll work as hard as I need to. I don't doubt that." Mr. Harrison set his notepad aside. "Marcus, I want to be honest with you. You have natural talent, perhaps more than anyone I've encountered in decades. But natural talent alone won't make you a great pianist. That requires years of dedicated practice, proper training, and sacrifice. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, sir. You'll need to practice at least 2 hours every day, ideally more. You'll need to learn to read music fluently. You'll need to unlearn some of the habits you've developed and replace them with proper technique. It will be frustrating at times. There will be moments when you want to quit." Mr. Harrison studied him carefully. "Why do you want this? Really want it?" Marcus thought about how to explain the thing that had driven him for so long. "Music is the only thing that's ever made sense to me," he said slowly. "When I hear it, when I imagine playing it, I feel like I understand something true about the world. Like, I'm connected to something bigger than my life. Without it, I'm just washing dishes and riding the bus. With it, I'm someone who has a purpose." Mr. Harrison nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Then let's begin. Your first lesson is about proper hand position, he demonstrated. His fingers curved naturally over the keys. Notice how my wrists are level with my knuckles, how my fingers form a gentle arch. This position allows for maximum control and endurance. Marcus mimicked the position, and Mr. Harrison adjusted his fingers, his wrists, the angle of his arms. They spent 30 minutes just on this, playing single notes with correct form. It felt awkward and unnatural compared to how Marcus had been playing, but he forced himself to focus and adapt. The weeks that followed were the most challenging and rewarding of Marcus's life. He worked his shift at the restaurant, then rushed to catch the bus to the academy. After his lessons, he often stayed to practice until the building closed at 10. Then he went home and studied music theory, until exhaustion forced him to sleep. His grandmother worried about how thin he was getting, how exhausted he looked. "You're going to work yourself to death," she scolded, bringing him homemade meals he sometimes forgot to eat. "I'm fine, Grandma. I promise. This is what I need to be doing." Father Matthews, too, expressed concern when Marcus missed several church visits. But when Marcus explained about the scholarship and showed him a recording of one of his practice sessions, the old priest's eyes lit up with pride. "You're really doing it?" he said, clasping Marcus's shoulder. "I knew you would find your way." Meanwhile, the video of Marcus's mall performance continued to spread online. It was shared tens of thousands of times, then hundreds of thousands. News websites picked up the story. Local television stations requested interviews. Marcus became, briefly, a minor sensation. The human interest story that made people feel good about the world. The attention was overwhelming and uncomfortable. Marcus didn't want to be famous for one lucky moment. He wanted to be good, genuinely good, through skill and hard work. He declined most of the interview requests, focusing instead on his lessons. But the attention did bring opportunities. A local piano store offered to let Marcus practice on their instruments during off hours. A community center invited him to give a free concert for underprivileged children. People he had never met sent messages of encouragement through social media. It also brought criticism. Some online commenters questioned whether he had really taught himself, suggesting the story was exaggerated for views. Others criticized his technique, pointing out the flaws that Marcus knew were there. A few people seemed angry that he was getting opportunities they felt others deserved more. Marcus tried to ignore the negative comments, but they stung. He was already painfully aware of his limitations, already working desperately to improve. The criticism just reminded him that he was an outsider in a world where most people started training as children, where having money and access had always been the price of entry. One evening, about 2 months into his lessons, Marcus sat at the academy piano feeling completely defeated. He had been working on a Chopin prelude for weeks, and he couldn't get it right. His fingers stumbled over a particularly difficult passage, no matter how many times he practiced it. Mr. Harrison had been patient, but clearly frustrated during their lesson earlier. Jennifer found him sitting with his head in his hands, the piano silent. "I'm not good enough," Marcus said. "Everyone thinks I'm this prodigy because of that video, but I'm not. I'm just a guy who got lucky once. The other students here, they're so much better. They've been training since they were kids." Jennifer sat down on the bench beside him. "Can I tell you something? When Mr. Harrison announced he was giving you a full scholarship, some of the instructors here were skeptical. They thought it was a publicity stunt, that you'd wash out in a few weeks. But you know what Mr. Harrison said? He said you had something more valuable than perfect technique. You had hunger, and that hunger would take you further than natural ability alone ever could. I don't feel very hungry right now. I feel tired." "That's when hunger matters most," Jennifer said. "Anyone can work hard when things are going well. The real test is whether you keep going when it's difficult. When you want to quit. That's when you find out what you're really made of." Marcus looked at the piano keys, thinking about everything that had brought him to this moment. The nights, studying in his tiny apartment. The days, watching that mall piano from a distance. The courage it took to step over that velvet rope. Had all of that been for nothing? Was he fooling himself? Then he thought about the music still living inside him, all the pieces he wanted to learn, all the sounds he wanted to create. The hunger Jennifer mentioned, it was still there. Tired. Maybe. Discouraged, certainly. But not gone. Not even close. He placed his hands back on the keys. "Show me that passage again," he said to Jennifer. "The one I keep messing up." She smiled and helped him work through it, breaking it down into smaller sections, slowing it down until his fingers found the right patterns. They practiced together for another hour, and by the end, Marcus still hadn't perfected it, but he was closer. Much closer. That night, riding the bus home, Marcus realized something important. The magic moment at the mall. The one everyone had seen on video. That had been the easy part. The real challenge was this: showing up every day, doing the work, even when it was hard, believing in himself when doubt crept in. This was where real transformation happened, not in a single moment of inspiration but in 1,000 small moments of perseverance. 6 months into his training, Marcus's life had transformed into a carefully balanced routine of work, practice, and study. His hands, once soft from dishwater, had developed the calluses and strength that came from hours at the keyboard. His technique improved steadily under Mr. Harrison's guidance, though he still had years of catching up to do compared to students who had started as children. The restaurant where Marcus worked had become supportive of his musical journey. Tony, the head cook, often let him leave a few minutes early to catch his bus to the academy. Rosa kept encouraging him. Bringing him food she claimed was leftover, but Marcus suspected she made especially for him. Even his boss, a normally stern man named Mr. Chen, seemed proud of having a minor celebrity on staff. "My daughter showed me your video," Mr. Chen said one day. "Very impressive. But don't forget, you still need reliable income. Artists starve. Dishwashers eat." The practicality of Mr. Chen's words echoed his grandmother's constant concerns. She was proud of him, but worried. Always worried. "What happens when people forget about your video?" she asked. "What happens when the scholarship ends?" "You need a backup plan, Marcus." But Marcus didn't want a backup plan. Backup plans were for people who expected to fail. He wanted this more than he wanted security, more than he wanted safety. He wanted to be a pianist the way other people wanted to breathe. His determination was tested when Mr. Harrison announced that the academy would be hosting a spring recital. All scholarship students were required to perform. Marcus would be playing in front of an audience for only the second time in his life. And this time, the stakes were much higher. This time, people would have expectations. "You'll perform 2 pieces," Mr. Harrison said during one of their lessons. "One classical, one of your choice. I suggest Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata for the classical piece. The second movement. It will showcase your emotional depth while being technically within your range." Marcus knew the piece. It was beautiful, melancholic, and challenging without being impossible. But the thought of performing it in front of an audience made his stomach twist with anxiety. "What if I mess up?" "You will mess up," Mr. Harrison said calmly. "Every performer makes mistakes. What matters is how you recover, how you continue. The audience isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for connection, for emotion, for authenticity. That's something you have in abundance." For his second piece, Marcus chose to arrange a modern song he had loved since childhood. Mr. Harrison raised his eyebrows at the choice but didn't object. "Make it your own," he advised. "Show them what makes you unique." Marcus practiced relentlessly in the weeks leading up to the recital. The Pathetique Sonata became embedded in his muscle memory, though he still occasionally fumbled certain passages. His arrangement of the modern song evolved and improved with each practice session. He played both pieces hundreds of times, sometimes in front of Jennifer or other academy staff who offered feedback. But practicing alone was different from performing for an audience. As the recital date approached, Marcus's anxiety grew. He had nightmares about forgetting the music entirely, about his hands freezing, about the audience laughing at him. The memory of his triumphant mall performance felt like it belonged to someone else, some braver version of himself he couldn't access anymore. 3 days before the recital, Marcus had a complete breakdown during practice. His fingers wouldn't cooperate, hitting wrong notes constantly. Frustration built until he slammed his hands on the keys in anger, creating a dissonant crash. He stood up from the bench, breathing hard, feeling like he wanted to put his fist through a wall. Mr. Harrison, who happened to be passing by, entered the practice room. "What's going on? I can't do this," Marcus said. "I'm not ready. Everyone's going to see that I'm a fraud, that I got lucky once, but I'm not actually good." "Sit down," Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm but kind. Marcus sat. Mr. Harrison took a seat beside him on the bench. "Do you know what imposter syndrome is?" Feeling like you don't deserve your success, like you've fooled everyone." "Exactly. And almost every artist experiences it, especially when they're stepping into new territory. Do you want to know a secret?" Mr. Harrison didn't wait for an answer. "I still get nervous before I perform. Still doubt myself. I've been playing for 60 years, and that feeling never entirely goes away." "How do you handle it?" "I remember why I play, not for perfection, not to prove myself to critics or impress an audience. I play because music is how I communicate things I can't put into words. When I sit at that piano and play, I'm sharing part of my soul with whoever is listening. That's what performance is really about. Not technical perfection, but human connection." Mr. Harrison placed his hands on the keys and began to play a simple melody, something Marcus didn't recognize. It was beautiful but uncomplicated, the kind of piece a beginner might learn. "I wrote this when I was 8 years old," Mr. Harrison said. "It's not sophisticated. It's not technically impressive. But it was the first time I composed something that came purely from my heart. I play it sometimes to remind myself why I started this journey." He finished the melody and looked at Marcus. "Why did you start yours? Why? 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 Why?" Marcus thought about standing in the mall, staring at that piano, feeling like his chest would burst from wanting to touch it. He thought about the music that had always lived inside him, demanding to be released. "Because I had to," he said quietly. "Because not playing felt like not living." Then that's what you need to remember when you're on that stage. You're not performing to prove anything. You're performing because you have to. Because the music needs to come out. The night of the recital arrived too quickly. The Academy's concert hall was small but elegant, with about 200 seats. Marcus peeked through the stage curtain and saw the audience filing in. His grandmother was there in the 3rd row, wearing her church dress. Rosa and Tony had come, sitting together near the back. Father Matthews sat near the front, his hands folded peacefully. Jennifer gave Marcus a thumbs up from the side of the stage. There were also strangers, people who had seen the video and wanted to see if Marcus was really as talented as that single performance suggested. Marcus saw a woman with a notepad, probably a journalist. He saw a man with professional camera equipment. The attention, that had briefly felt exciting, now felt suffocating. Several students performed before Marcus. They were good, technically proficient, playing difficult pieces with apparent ease. Marcus watched from backstage, his anxiety increasing with each performance. These were real musicians, people who had dedicated their lives to the craft. What was he doing here? 6 months of lessons couldn't make up for a lifetime of training. Then Mr. Harrison was introducing him. "Our next performer is someone special," Mr. Harrison said to the audience. "Many of you have seen the video of his impromptu mall performance. What you haven't seen is the incredible dedication he's shown in the months since. Working full-time, practicing every available moment, pushing himself to improve every single day. Please welcome Marcus Williams." Marcus walked onto the stage, his legs feeling weak. The piano sat there, waiting. The audience was a blur of faces. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He sat at the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed his hands over the keys. For a terrifying moment, his mind went blank. He couldn't remember the opening notes of the Pathétique sonata. The silence stretched. Someone coughed in the audience. Marcus could feel panic rising in his throat. Then, from somewhere in his memory, Father Matthew's voice emerged. The universe has a funny way of opening doors for people who refuse to give up. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about every struggle that had brought him here. Every dish washed, every bus ride, every night studying by lamplight in his tiny apartment. Every time someone told him to be realistic, to give up on impossible dreams. He thought about the hunger Jennifer had mentioned, the hunger that kept him going when everything was difficult. He opened his eyes and began to play. The first notes of Beethoven's Pathétique sonata flowed from the piano, gentle and melancholic. Marcus's hands found their positions. His fingers moved with the confidence that came from hundreds of hours of practice. The anxiety didn't disappear entirely, but it transformed into energy, into emotion that poured into the music. He made mistakes. A note in the third phrase that was slightly off. A moment in the development section where his fingers almost stumbled. But he remembered Mr. Harrison's words about recovery, about continuing. He didn't let the mistakes stop the flow of the music. He pushed through, letting the emotion of the piece carry him forward. When the Pathétique sonata ended, there was a moment of silence before the applause began. It was warm, enthusiastic, genuine. Marcus stood and took a brief bow, then sat back down for his second piece. This time, the nervousness was less. This time, he felt more connected to the piano, to the music, to the moment. His arrangement of the modern song was different from anything else performed that night. It was contemporary, accessible, emotional, in a way that classical pieces sometimes weren't. Marcus poured everything into it, every feeling of longing and hope and determination. His hands danced across the keys, creating harmonies that were uniquely his own. The audience loved it. When he finished, they didn't just applaud, they cheered. Several people stood. Marcus saw his grandmother wiping tears from her eyes. Rosa was clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Even the journalist was smiling, writing rapidly in her notepad. Marcus stood and bowed again. And this time, he allowed himself to smile. He had done it. Not perfectly, but genuinely. He had shared his music with the world. And the world had listened. The weeks following the recital brought changes Marcus hadn't anticipated. The journalist who attended wrote a follow-up article about his journey, and the story gained traction in local media. More importantly, several musicians and teachers who had been in the audience reached out with opportunities. A church across town offered Marcus a position as their pianist for Sunday services. The pay wasn't much, but it was something, and it meant regular, performing experience. A wedding planner contacted him about playing ceremonies. A local community college asked if he would consider teaching beginner piano to their continuing education students one evening per week. Marcus sat in Mr. Harrison's office, overwhelmed by the sudden array of possibilities. I don't know if I'm ready to teach anyone. I've faith. And, he said, holding the community college's offer letter. You'll always be learning, Mr. Harrison replied. That's the nature of music. But you have something valuable to teach, Marcus. You understand what it's like to want something desperately, to start from nothing, to fight for every bit of progress. That perspective is rare among music teachers. Most of us started young, had advantages we didn't recognize. You can connect with students who feel like music is out of their reach. Marcus thought about this. He remembered being that person, standing outside the velvet rope, believing the piano was for other people. Maybe you're right. I know I'm right. Take the teaching position. Take the church job. Keep working at the restaurant if you need to for now, but start building a life around music. That's how careers are made. One small opportunity at a time. So Marcus reorganized his life once again. He reduced his hours at the restaurant to part-time, which Mr. Chen reluctantly agreed to after Marcus trained a replacement for some shifts. He took the church position and found that playing hymns for congregations was deeply satisfying in ways he hadn't expected. The teaching position at the community college terrified him at first, but his students, adults returning to learning, appreciated his patience and understanding. His first student was a 55-year-old woman named Patricia, who had always wanted to play piano, but whose parents couldn't afford lessons when she was young. Marcus saw himself in her, saw that same hunger and uncertainty. He taught her with patience and encouragement, sharing not just technique, but the emotional truth that music could be learned at any age, that it was never too late to start. The video of his mall performance continued to have a life of its own online. Every few weeks, it would resurface on a different platform or in a different context. Someone would share it with a caption about following dreams or overcoming obstacles. Each time it spread, Marcus received new messages from people saying his story inspired them to pursue their own abandoned passions. Some messages came from other musicians, struggling artists who felt validated by his journey. Others came from people in completely different fields, teachers and writers and athletes who saw in his story a reflection of their own struggles. An elderly man wrote to say that watching Marcus play had convinced him to finally write the novel he'd been planning for 30 years. A teenager wrote to say the video helped her convince her parents to let her pursue art school. Marcus tried to respond to as many messages as he could, though it became impossible to answer them all. Each one reminded him that his story had become bigger than just himself, that his moment of courage at the mall had rippled outward in ways he never imagined. But success brought its own challenges. The more opportunities Marcus received, the more time he spent away from pure practice and improvement. He was performing regularly now, which was wonderful, but he worried that his technical development was slowing. Other students at the academy who practiced 8 hours a day were advancing faster than him. One evening, feeling frustrated with his progress on a particularly difficult Rachmaninoff piece, Marcus confided in Father Matthews at the church. The old pianist listened quietly as Marcus expressed his fears about not being good enough, about being left behind by more dedicated students. "Let me ask you something," Father Matthews said when Marcus finished. "When you play for the Sunday service, when you see the congregation singing along to your music, how does that feel?" "It feels good. It feels meaningful. And when you teach Patricia and watch her finally master a piece she's been working on for weeks, that feels amazing. Like I'm giving someone else the gift I was given." "Then you're already successful, Marcus." "Not in the way concert pianists measure success, perhaps, but in a way that matters just as much, maybe more. You're using your gift to connect with people, to bring joy and meaning to their lives. That's what music is for." Marcus absorbed this perspective, recognizing the truth in it. He had been measuring himself against classical virtuosos, against people who had devoted their entire lives to technical mastery. But his path was different, and that didn't make it less valuable. He continued to study and improve, working with Mr. Harrison on increasingly complex pieces. But he also embraced the teaching, the church work, the small performances at weddings and community events. Each one helped him grow, not just as a musician but as a person who understood music's role in everyday life. A year after the mall performance, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. The Music Academy was hosting a gala fundraiser, and Mr. Harrison wanted Marcus to be the featured performer. It would be his biggest audience yet, 300 people, including potential donors, other musicians, and local dignitaries. "I want you to tell your story, Mr. Harrison said. "Talk to the audience about your journey. Then play. Let them see what's possible when talent meets opportunity. When someone refuses to give up on their dreams." The night of the gala, Marcus stood backstage in a suit that Jennifer had helped him pick out. It fit properly, made him look professional and confident, even if he didn't entirely feel that way inside. He could hear the audience gathering, the murmur of conversations, the clink of glasses. His grandmother was there again, sitting with Rosa and Tony. Patricia, his student, had come with her husband. Father Matthews was in the front row. Jennifer gave him an encouraging smile from the wings. But there were also many faces Marcus didn't recognize, important people who could open doors or close them based on what they saw tonight. Mr. Harrison introduced him with words that made Marcus's chest tight with emotion. He spoke about the young man who had taught himself piano from books and videos, who had dared to step over a velvet rope because the music inside him demanded to be released. He spoke about dedication and passion, and the transformative power of education. Then Marcus walked onto the stage. He approached the microphone set up beside the piano. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "A little over a year ago, I was washing dishes and dreaming about touching a piano," Marcus began. "I had never taken a lesson, never had an instrument to practice on, but I had music living inside me. And it felt like that music would destroy me if I didn't find a way to let it out." He told them about standing in the mall, about the hunger and the frustration and the moment of decision when he stepped over that rope. He told them about Mr. Harrison's generosity, about the scholarship that changed his life. He kept it brief, focusing on the essential truth. Opportunity matters. Access matters. And talent exists in places we often overlook if we don't bother to look. "I'm not the most technically skilled pianist," Marcus said honestly. "Students at this academy have been training since they were 6 years old. They can play pieces I'll need years to master. But I've learned something important this year. Music isn't just about technical perfection. It's about connection. It's about taking what's inside you and sharing it with the world. That's what I want to do tonight." He sat at the piano. The familiar weight of expectation settled over him. But now, he knew how to carry it. He played the Pathétique Sonata again, and it was better than it had been at the recital, smoother and more confident. Then he played his arrangement, which had evolved and deepened over months of performances. Finally, he played something new. A piece he had been composing himself, drawing on everything he had learned and felt and experienced. The audience was silent as his own composition flowed from the piano. It wasn't as complex as Rachmaninoff or as structured as Beethoven, but it was honest, deeply personal. A musical representation of his journey from dishwasher to musician, from dreamer to someone living his dream. When he finished, the silence lasted for a heartbeat. Then two. Marcus felt a moment of panic. Then the audience erupted in applause. And this time, it was different from before. This time, Marcus felt like they understood not just his talent, but his story. The full weight of what it meant to come from where he had come from and stand where he now stood. People approached him afterward with opportunities, with praise, with their own stories of abandoned dreams and revived passions. The gala raised more money than any previous fundraiser, and Mr. Harrison credited Marcus's performance with inspiring the donors' generosity. But the moment that mattered most to Marcus came later, after most people had left. His grandmother approached him, her eyes shining with tears. She had been skeptical of his dreams, protective and practical, but now she hugged him tightly and whispered, "I was wrong to tell you to give up. I was wrong to think dreams don't matter. You showed me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible they seem." 2 years after that night in the mall, Marcus's life bore little resemblance to what it had been. He worked as a piano teacher at the academy, taught classes at the community college, played at churches and weddings and small concerts. He still practiced daily, still worked to improve, still felt the hunger that had driven him from the beginning. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He would probably never perform at Carnegie Hall or record albums that sold millions of copies. But he was a musician, genuinely and completely. He had taken the music inside him and brought it into the world. He had proven that access and opportunity could transform lives, that talent existed in unexpected places, that refusing to give up on your dreams was sometimes enough to make them real. The mall still had a piano in its plaza, though it was a different one now. Updated and sleek, Marcus walked past it sometimes, remembering the terrified young man who had stood there, desperate to touch the keys. That young man had been brave without knowing it, had made a choice that changed everything. Marcus taught his students to be brave too, to step over their own velvet ropes, to believe that the music inside them deserved to be heard. Because he had learned the most important lesson of all. The only thing standing between impossible and possible was the courage to try, to fail, to try again, and to keep trying until the music in your head became music in the world. And that made all the difference.